Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Melissa Burton. I am an immigration policy analyst with the Denver Office of Immigrant and Refugee Affairs with the City and County of Denver. And you are here tonight for an ITIN information session. And I'm here joined by our partners, the Denver Asset Building Coalition, as well as immigration attorney Jennifer Kane-Rios, who will all be speaking with you tonight about the ITIN process and just questions that may come up for you or may have come up for you already about the process. Hello, everybody. Thank you for being here tonight. We are Denver Asset Building Coalition, and I'm the executive director, Wendy. And this is Yael Larmore. Hi. She's been with us for longer than me, 21 years. Our organization, Denver Asset Building Coalition, we prepare tax returns for people. It's free. We also are a free tax law firm. So I'm a tax lawyer and I have one other employee that's a tax lawyer. And we provide our services for free for people who need help with ITINs, people who are being audited, have IRS collection issues, liens and levies and garnishments, things like that. We help people with that for free. We're also certifying acceptance agents for ITINs. And so not only do we prepare the ITIN applications for people, but we are able to certify people's original identification documents so that they just bring it to our office to look at. They don't have to send it to Austin for weeks or months. It takes at least 3 months, right? Yes. Usually. So we can do that in our office. So people who are applying for ITINs don't have to be without their identification documents for several weeks or months. So today we're here talking primarily about ITINs. And so the question here is, what is an ITIN? ITINs are individual taxpayer identification numbers, and they're issued by the IRS to people who are eligible or not eligible for Social Security numbers. So if you have a Social Security number or you're eligible for one, you don't want to worry about ITINs, okay? Although you may have family members that would need an ITIN, and we can talk about that shortly. But you cannot get an ITIN number unless you have a federal tax filing requirement. So for people who aren't working, aren't claiming children, or doing something with the federal tax system, there's no need to apply for an ITIN. You need to have some kind of tax filing requirement in order to do it. Okay, so getting an ITIN enables individuals such as immigrants, non-resident aliens, and dependents to comply with tax laws and access certain tax benefits and services. So as I mentioned before, if you have a Social Security number or you're eligible for one, you don't file for an ITIN.
When I say Social Security, a lot of people work with a fake Social Security.
Yes, which happens, but that's not the same thing. That's not the same thing.
Exactly.
Yeah. If there's a fake Social Security number, that doesn't count. We're talking about one that's actually issued by the US government. If you can't get one of those, you can probably get an ITIN, but you have to apply for it. Okay, so Social Security numbers. You're eligible for a Social Security number if you're a US citizen or if you've been admitted by the United States for permanent residence or US employment. Okay, so there's something called an EIN. It's an employer identification number. And what an EIN is, it's a number that the federal government issues so that you can have employees. If you have employees, you have to have this number as an employer. There's other things, maybe to open a business bank account. There's other reasons you might need this EIN number. And the good news is, to get an EIN number, you can have a Social Security number or an ITIN. So if you have an ITIN, you can apply to get one of these numbers that allows you to have a business and do business banking and have employees. So to get a Social Security number, you use form, it's called SS5, application for a Social Security card. To get form SS5 or to find out if you're eligible to get a Social Security number, go to ssa.gov or communicate with the Social Security Administration, one of their offices, and they can help you figure out what you need to do.
Again, if you can get a social security number, you can file your taxes without anything further. Okay, no need to file for an ITIN. So what do ITINs help me do? The ITIN, this slide is a little bit incorrect. It says the ITIN is for federal tax purposes only. That's not correct. We also use the ITIN to file for state taxes. If you live in a state where filing tax returns is a requirement or some kind of benefit, you can also get it for other purposes. Like you can use it in Colorado to get a bank account and to get a driver's license and some other things. And a lot of those things are state specific. An ITIN doesn't entitle you to Social Security benefits, and it doesn't change your immigration status or your right to work in the United States. But however, it does allow you to file your taxes. If you work and you pay taxes through your work, it allows you to get refunds back. And there are some benefits. For example, there's a limitation on what you can get by filing a federal tax return versus someone with a Social Security number. There are some restrictions and limitations on credits and benefits and money that comes back. But in our state, in Colorado, we actually have very generous child tax credit and earned income credit for ITIN holders. So Colorado is actually better and more generous than the IRS is about these things. Who needs an ITIN? So any individual who isn't eligible for a Social Security number, but they need to file a federal tax return. So that can be resident and non-resident aliens filing a US tax return. It can be individuals ineligible for a Social Security number, but are required to file a US tax return. It can be for alien dependents or spouses of US citizens and resident aliens, and non-resident aliens claiming certain tax benefits. So we'll talk for a second about different situations and different scenarios where we might have a combination of Social Security numbers and ITINs in a family. So you might have children that have Social Security numbers. They were born here, but their parents don't have any way to file a tax return. They were not born here. They can apply for ITIN numbers so that they can file their taxes and they can claim their children as dependents, just like normal. And then sometimes you might have one spouse that has a Social Security number and the other spouse does not or is not eligible for it. But in order for them to get the benefit of filing together, which is most often preferable, they need to get that spouse some kind of number so that they can participate in the tax filing system. So that would be an ITIN. And so we see situations, see every kind of situation. You know, we see some families with like a husband with a Social Security number, wife with an ITIN, one kid with a social, one with the, and then there's adoptions and all these other things. So it's good to work with a professional to kind of figure out what's going on. But and we'll talk in a minute about what we need to apply for it. Okay, so when should you apply for an ITIN? So anytime during the year when you have a filing requirement. So our services are open year round. We have more availability outside of tax season. So tax season for us means January through April, but you can file at any time, but you file for an ITIN application with a tax return. You got to file a tax return with your ITIN application. Yes, sir. Do you have to what? Renew? Okay, so there's a really good question here. Do we have to renew the ITIN every year? And no, it's not. It's every 3 years. If you're filing, go ahead, Gail.
If you don't, let's say you apply for the ITIN this year and you don't file the next 2 years taxes, automatically your ITIN is canceled. You need to file taxes. If you comply with the law where you file your taxes, it can take up to 10 years to renew the ITIN. But if you don't comply, it cancel them.
Y se cancela el primero. ¿Le dan uno nuevo o renovan el mismo?
No, se renova.
I get a new number or do I keep the same number?
No, se renova. Y normalmente,
Es que me
al
pasó.
hacer la solicitud,
Pues eso.
okay. Normally, when you reapply, they ask you, this is a renew. So you need to know your number and how is spell your name and everything. And we renew it. But it's the same process. Like you apply for the new one, and you renew, you need to present all the documents. It takes between 12 to 15 weeks.
I have some clients, they don't want to work.
but they just want to go to school and open a bank account. Can they apply for it?
They have to have a tax filing requirement.
No.
No.
The IRS doesn't issue an ITIN if you don't file taxes.
Yeah, there has to be something where they're working or their spouse is working.
Yes.
Some reason to actually file a tax return, because it's really, this is a function of the IRS and the tax system. And are they here on student visas? No.
They have to be claimed for somebody. If they are a student, they have a parents. The parents have to work. They have to make the living.
Yeah.
So the parents claim this as dependent. They apply for the dependents, I think, no.
Or the student could be working.
Or the student can be working too.
Also,
And just keep in mind that this is something that the IRS created. This is an IRS function to allow people to file taxes. This is where the ITIN came from. And so the purpose of it, the primary purpose, is to file a tax return, because someone needs to file a tax return, because people used to not be able to file a tax return at all without this number. But now the government has allowed us to have these numbers, but it's for the purpose, the primary purpose, to file a tax return. And then there's a bunch of other secondary and tertiary, other reasons, other benefits to having the ITIN. But you have to understand the part of the government that's giving these numbers is doing it so that you can file a tax return. Did you want to add something?
Well, I just want to say that in a lot of ways, what is happening with the ITIN numbers being useful in different contexts was originally what the Social Security Administration meant for the Social Security number to be used for, meaning for employers to withhold money from paychecks for a retirement fund in the future. That's what Social Security numbers were originally created for and were originally used for. And over the years, they have become used for many, many other things. And a little bit of that same kind of creep is happening with the ITINs. But the only way for the IRS to issue an ITIN is to have a tax reason for it to start with, right? And then if you get it, in places where it helps, it can help in a few other ways.
And you have to have certified taxes from the state. What happens when you apply for the driver license? The requirement is you have to have an ITIN number and you have to file taxes in the state. Because one of the requirements is you need the state taxes certified for the state to bring it to apply for the driver license.
I'll tell you from a tax perspective, though, how this works. The ITIN does not give someone authorization to work in the country, but people do. And they often use a social security number that is not theirs when they apply for the job. And they have W-2s with a social security number that doesn't belong to them. They come to us, we prepare that tax return, we use the ITIN number, but then when we enter the W-2s in the software, we have to say what social security number they're using. There's a place that if there's an ITIN number on a tax return, our software makes us disclose what social security number they're using to get the job, or we can't electronically file a tax return. So this is a tax issue. Just they want people being able to file, report taxes, get their money back. It's not about work permits or other things. We're going to have some more conversations about that because it's complicated. But tax, this is created just for the tax system so people can participate in that. It doesn't mean that they were authorized to work, but it kind of accepts and acknowledges that there's this dysfunction in our system where people are working and need to work who can't get the social security number, and we have to still do something about it. So that's the reality. Yes, ma'am.
Is it possible to get the ITIN or apply for the ITIN if you are filing an estimated tax form?
No, it's
Now
no,
that they wouldn't still
it-
give you.
no, it needs to be filed with the tax return, a 1040, a version of 1040. Okay, so how to apply? The most common ways to apply are with our organization, for example, we help file a tax return, and then we prepare the ITIN application, which is called a W-7. And then we are certifying acceptance agents. So we see your original documents. And Yael, are you okay talking about what we need? We'll talk about what we need.
Okay,
But we'll see your original documents and we look at them and we see that they're originals and that they're not expired. And we take copies of them, but we certify on the application that we reviewed your documents and that they looked authentic and they were originals, all these things, and send that in. But I'm gonna let Yael talk about what we need.
there is many documents we can use. One is passport, birth certificate, board registration, foreign driver license. All those cards have to have an expiration date. If you don't have, like, say, passport, you have something from immigration department with a picture. We can use it together with another valid document. So there is different document we can use, but everything had to be valid, no expire. At least one of the documents had to have a picture. Normally, passport, if you don't have the entrance seal, you need a birth certificate or another document together.
Aunque haya expirado,
Yes.
o
It doesn't have the entrance seal, you can use another document. It can be birth certificate, it can be the foreign board registration, expired, driver license, etc., etc. You can use your driver license from Colorado, you have Colorado driver license.
Okay, it can take 12 to 15 weeks. And when does it expire? This is where we talk about it. If you don't file for 3 consecutive years, it may expire. And we already talked about what you need to apply. And there's some examples of documents. And so our slideshow is available. There's some samples. Anyone can get a copy of it, right? We'll distribute it. And we have this in English and Spanish. And I'm just going to hand it over, but we're available. We'll stay late.
Hello, thank you very much for coming. This is a wonderful combination of information, and I'm so glad you're here to learn about this. I'm learning at the same time because I am not a tax expert, but I am an immigration attorney. That's all I do is immigration law. I've been doing it for more than 20 years, and I help lots of different people from all over the world, and I help employers with their employees. I help family members with other family members. I help people with humanitarian benefits as well. So generally, when you think about immigration law, you can kind of think of 3 main areas of immigration law. One that's based on family relationships, one that's based on employment-based opportunities or relationships, and another one that is based on humanitarian concerns. And a lot of those issues are things that we see when people are trying to figure out how to navigate the legal system in the US besides immigration law. So one important thing, and again, I'm not a tax preparer, but I know that if you earn income, you should pay taxes. The details about actually how to do that and do that properly is exactly why we have people like Wendy and her organization to help make sure people are informed about how to take that step. And if they don't have a social security number, then the ITIN is an alternative way to comply with your tax obligations. And oftentimes there are benefits that are associated with completing that process as well. For people who need to use an ITIN, some of them are students and international students, and they do not yet have a work permit. Some of them are investors based on treaties that the United States has with another country. But many of the people, the great majority of people that I see who need to use ITINs because they don't have a work permit, or they had a work permit and it expired and they don't have access to it anymore. But oftentimes, if someone had a work permit in the past, they applied for and received a social security number already. And you've already heard that if you have a social security number, you don't need to apply for an ITIN. Okay. Many people who are here and have the right to apply for a work permit Right now, the new version of the I-765 application for employment authorization document has a section where you are asked, do you already have a social security number? And if you do, you enter that information. If you don't, you say no, but you have the option to have the two agencies, U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services and the Social Security Administration, coordinate in issuing the employment authorization document and the Social Security number and Social Security card at about the same time. And they actually arrive in the mail about the same time, within a week or two of each other. So one of the things I wanted to talk about and just put some perspective on this is that the ITIN was created in 1996, which happens to be the same year that some very serious changes happened with the immigration law that have quite dire consequences on the ability of people who have come to the US and not been able to come with permission, or have come with permission and haven't been able to maintain status. Those laws that passed in 1996 made it impossible for many of those people to be able to move successfully from one step of the immigration system to the next, to be able to change status from one type of work visa to lawful permanent residence. Once someone has lawful permanent residence, that's really what we talk about as a path to citizenship. And there are lots and lots of people whose immigration path somehow ends before they're able to get lawful permanent residence. And a lot of that reason is because of serious penalties that were created in laws passed in 1996. And if you have other questions about that, oftentimes an immigration attorney will need to know your entire immigration history from the first time you came until the last time you arrived, because there are severe consequences for people who've been in the US without permission and depart. And it gets more complicated if there are other entries, especially entries without permission. So in general, I think it's important to keep in mind that at the same time, Congress created the ITIN to help people participate in our government and in our society by paying taxes. That same year, the immigration laws became quite complicated. So I am happy to return to a question that was brought up a little bit earlier and break it down into several different pieces. So someone asked about, how does a person here in the US without employment authorization, how do they work? Okay, well, as an attorney, my job is to make sure that the information I give you complies with the law. So first thing, tell the truth. Provide correct information. If you provide incorrect information to government agencies, you will likely suffer consequences. Whether you suffer consequences sooner or later, it will complicate your ability to move forward with any given process, whether it ends up with you owing penalties on taxes in a year or two, or not being able to get your green card when you finally have the potential to do so. So tell the truth, okay? And if you don't understand what a form you're filling out is for, or why you're giving the information, ask. Talk to people. There are resources in the city, nonprofits who can help you. Okay. And when it comes to tax advice, it sounds like your organization, Wendy, is ready and able anytime after May right now to answer questions when it comes to that. So lots of people who don't have a work permit start their own business. How do they do that? Well, it kind of ends up being chicken or the egg. How do you do this first, right? And in that first year of starting the business, it sounds like it's complicated. All of that is tax stuff, and that's beyond my expertise. But what I can tell you is lots of people work and earn money. And if they earn money and they're not an employee, they're a contractor. And they still have to document their income. If your employer, if the person you work for, the person you contract with pays you, they are supposed to report the money that they pay you. They're supposed to report that to the IRS and give you a tax form. And then you're on your way to starting that process of working with the IRS. As an immigration attorney, I see this in terms of family members coming to me wanting to apply for a spouse who has been in the United States for several years, maybe came as a visitor, but didn't leave after 6 months when they were scheduled to leave. And they have to figure out how they're going to show that they have a real marriage in order to get an immigration benefit, in order to get a green card. Well, one of the ways that they meet that burden is to show that they filed taxes together. And that's where a US citizen spouse who would have a social security number would file and needs the information that her spouse who doesn't have a social security number can get an ITIN instead. And that allows them to file their taxes together. Now, depending on the timing, they may need to ask for an extension on their taxes or go back and correct taxes that were filed incorrectly. But if you're married, you need to show that on your taxes. And if you're not sure why someone is saying, are you head of household? Are you not married? When did you get married? Are you just living together? There are consequences to answering that question incorrectly. So if you say that you're single just because your spouse doesn't have an ITIN, that can later be interpreted by an immigration officer that you weren't really married, or you didn't intend to be married, or there's evidence that you didn't file your taxes properly. And that can open you up to lots of very uncomfortable questions and make your process in immigration more difficult. So that's just an example. Every day, we see people who file their taxes incorrectly. If you don't think you're getting the right advice, get a second opinion. If you don't understand why you've been told to file a certain way and it doesn't make sense, it probably doesn't make sense. And you do need to get a second opinion. So when it comes to we have lots of people in Colorado who are immigrants. And since we're talking about people who need ITINs, I wanted to make sure that I provided you with a little bit of an idea of how many people we're talking about. These numbers are from 2021, but I think that they provide an insight into the impact immigrants and even undocumented immigrants have in our state of Colorado. So based on these numbers, again, 2021, there were just under 150,000 undocumented immigrants in the state of Colorado. There are also more than 15,000 undocumented entrepreneurs, people who've opened their own businesses. And those businesses are going to employ other people. So they create jobs. And undocumented immigrants paid in 2021.
Hello, everybody. Thank you.
$41.6 million in taxes. Of that, 275 million were federal taxes. And then 166.3 million were state and local taxes, taxes that go to help maintain our roads and our schools and our libraries. So if you earn an income, you're expected to pay taxes on that income. You just have to figure out how. And that's what organizations like Wendy's are here to help with. Does anyone else have any particular questions? I can talk about lots of other immigration issues. I can talk about the penalties that people are facing because of the laws that were passed in 1996 that are still making it very difficult for anyone who is here without permission or who has fallen out of status to fix their immigration status. There just isn't a way. I can also talk about the fact that our immigration system needs reform. There are lots of different jobs that need to be done in our economy, and there are not the correct categories of visas available to fill those jobs. So for example, a huge area where we need workers is in the construction industry. There is no visa to allow people to come and work in the United States year-round with either low-skilled or unskilled positions, for example, in construction. So those, that in and of itself, we need a different worker program. Are there any questions about any of those directions or a different direction altogether? Yes, sir.
We're trying to figure this out through Opportunity Now.
Mhm.
I am a owner of a construction industry called Apex Energy USA.
Mhm.
So I'm here to, because I speak several languages,
Mhm.
and I'm calling from Syria. I'm into refugees.
Mhm.
So what I'm trying to do is just trying to employ through education,
Mhm.
through English,
Mhm.
through licensing to get in the construction industry, the kind of the walls that you're hitting.
Right. And refugees have employment authorization,
Yes.
right? As soon as they enter the United States, they have, we need to change the law. So we need immigration reform is what we need. So the fact that those opportunities for refugees are available and they are being welcomed with jobs and other support systems is wonderful, right? But the people who are not just coming as refugees, who have been here for years, are stuck in a broken system and it needs to be fixed. So we need immigration reform. So besides taking on immigration cases to help individual people where the law allows me to, one of the things I do on a regular basis is speak about advocating for change, advocating for immigration reform. And my organization of immigration attorneys are in contact at least quarterly with all of our Congress people in Colorado, and are looking for allies who are willing to talk about their personal experience with needing workers. Yeah, please. So I'm not sure. So I think one of the things we need to do is speak specifically about people in specific situations. For example, people who are dreamers, right? There's no solution. There's no pathway to permanent residence for them. There's no pathway to citizenship. There's some of them are eligible for what's called Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals, DACA, right? And only some of them are because it was passed in 2012. It had age limitations, and then it's also been under litigation. So people who were able to get into DACA can renew and keep getting their work authorization every 2 years. But people who, for some reason, couldn't get in because of the timing can't, right? So they are here without an option. We need immigration reform. One way to look at kids who've come here, right, would be to consider something like the DREAM Act, right? That would identify a group of people, group of young people, and provide them with a pathway to a temporary status, and then eventually, hopefully, permanent residence that would allow them access to becoming a US citizen. So we need to fix the system. Unfortunately, there isn't a solution, right? For some people, there just isn't, and we need to fix that. Yes.
Right? What is the right form of business in order to, should they incorporate and get the EIN or become, you know what I'm saying?
And that's outside your wheelhouse too, or is it in your wheelhouse?
Yes. So what people are doing is getting an ITIN number. With that ITIN number, they can apply for an EIN. They can be their own business. Okay. So I want to recommend that people, if they're going to start incorporating a business, they need to meet with a business attorney, get a lot of advice, because let me tell you what comes to me as a tax attorney running a nonprofit that does this for free. Somebody is talking to people and having them set up C Corps and S Corps and resources like mine. We're not going to file those tax returns. You got to go pay someone $3,000-$5,000 to file a tax return for a corporation. You can be a sole proprietor. You can be an LLC, much different. But yes, someone needs to go. There's a lot of resources as far as business startup classes. But yes, there's the chicken and egg situation because you can't get an ITIN until you have a filing requirement. But if you do one job where you have to report income, because we got to report all our income, then you can file a tax return. So it's not necessarily a whole year. Okay. All right.
Thank you.
So the solution is not always easy. Sometimes it's complicated and sometimes there are penalties that you have to pay because it's complicated. But if you are informed about how to do things the correct way, you're going to minimize the amount of problem that you have. If you use a social security number that does not belong to you, whether you make it up or you borrow it from someone in a highly charged enforcement environment, you could easily be charged for a crime. So whether or not that happens right now, not so much, but that doesn't mean it's not a problem and it's not a crime. So you got to tell the truth. You got to understand what your options are. And even if it's complicated, get the information you need and do the right thing, whether it's talking to an immigration attorney, a tax professional, a business professional. There are resources out there that the city has and other nonprofits are here to help. So get the information you need and tell the truth, ask the questions.
We'll open it up for a question and answer session. I finished speaking, but I think that it's a good pivot for me to kind of tack on to what Jennifer just shared by saying that the path is also not straightforward. The reality in Denver and in the same county is that we have a very diverse population with tens of thousands of individuals who identify as immigrants or refugees, dreamers, and so on and so forth. Many individuals who do have a path to permanent protections, to work authorization, many who do not. And so that is why I say or underscore the point that the path is not straightforward. There is not a solution for every single individual, but that does not mean that their options are zero either, regardless of immigration status. And so I shared earlier that I am with the Denver Office of Immigrant and Refugee Affairs. Our office was created in 2005. And we are not a direct services provider, but what we do or act as is a bridge between community and all of the various departments or agencies, nonprofits, community-based organizations, etc., that offer those services, those direct services. It can be related to legal services. It can be related to financial services or financial education and empowerment. It can be related to health, to food access, to housing assistance, so on and so forth. So we are not the office that provides those direct services, but oftentimes many community members don't know where to start or don't know who the appropriate contacts are for those services, that is where our office steps in. And so to Jennifer's point, there are services within the city that cover those various categories I just mentioned that are available to individuals regardless of immigration status. Now, that list is not comprehensive, right? And it is not endlessly long, but those services do exist. And so we want community members to be aware of that first and foremost, but also understand, why does the ITIN matter? You know, what about it is important? What does it mean for me? What does it mean for community? And so one of those points was actually already mentioned earlier in the presentation, and that was about a Colorado driver's license for state identification, right? An ITIN and or social security number can enable individuals to begin that path of obtaining a state driver's license or identification. There are more requirements involved, of course, but it is a gateway for that resource and also many other like access to resources. So you have the ITIN, you have a Colorado driver's license, and then for those of us who do have a driver's license, it is very much a key, and especially for our immigrant refugee populations, to then be able to access pathways that they wouldn't otherwise have absent that identification, correct? Or absent the ITIN, for example. And so that is something we want to continue to kind of underscore, at least through our office and on this end, that people are aware that the information is accessible to them. We have wonderful presenters here today who are also resources to you. This very library, the Plaza program that I mentioned earlier, they also help individuals connect to information about the ITIN process, including the requirements that were covered by the Denver Asset Building Coalition, items people need to be able to apply for that process, what it entails. The Plaza program is here to assist with that. They are also a good resource to be able to share information on what is required to apply for a driver's license. So for individuals who don't have a license or a state identification now for whatever reason, but are on that path and just need access to more information, that access exists here. It exists also in other organizations within the city and through our office as well. And so I just want folks to be aware of that and know you can reach out to us, okay? No tengan pena, don't hesitate. We are an access point to you. The sign-in sheet in the back, if you shared an email address with us, or if you shared an email address through the online registration form, we can get you connected to our office's monthly newsletter. That newsletter not only features resources like these, but also opportunities for future events like this one, and not just specific to the ITIN, right? It can also cover various other topics, but we want to hear from you all what is useful, what is helpful, what the needs are in community, right? So with that, I do want to open it up for any other general questions that maybe weren't already covered that people have, that people are curious about. I will just say though, for our immigration attorney, in Jennifer's case, we unfortunately can't answer case specific questions tonight, but we can certainly answer, you know, broader, more general questions, some of which have already been asked by the audience, and thank you so much for those questions. If there are no questions, we will be sticking around for a little bit of time to be able to connect folks to the resources or at the table, or if you have questions about the resources that are at the table, please also let us know. But thank you so much for being here. And if you have any questions.